at this tweet you put out, and this is one of a banger right here. France is tipping into complete revolution. Soon there will be no way back from this. You gotta love the French people. Neoliberalism may die in France. And there's 2 points I want to have you speak on. It's funny because Americans used to always joke how French were soft. They used to have these past jokes. French, what are you, French? Like to make them like they're soft, but yet they're doing this. But can you speak to what do you mean by neoliberalism could possibly die in France? Could you speak to what that means?
Well, one of the things that's happened here, if you look at this, one of the things that was obvious was Emmanuel Macron was taking an action that he didn't have the votes in Parliament. The French people, 2 out of every French people before it happened, 2 out of every 3 French people opposed. Upwards of 70% of the French people opposed the changes that he was making with their pensions. He didn't have the votes in Parliament, so that you have to ask the question: who was asking him to do this? It was obviously coming from the EU. It was obviously coming from outside of his country. The EU is saying, we need you to do this. And he was like, okay. So that's this neoliberal concept where you get rid of democracy and you put together this EU group, this EU non-democratic group that wasn't voted in, and they can impose non-democratic rules on any given country within their federation, as it were. And that's a big part of an important part of neoliberalism. Trade deals and stuff always do that. They make some court outside of the country that you can't sue them because they're not part of your country. Well, I think what's going on is the French people are, they didn't expect the French people to go to this extent. But when I say this, they're tipping into revolution. It's getting to the point where the citizens are no longer manageable. Where now what happens if you say, I'm in charge of this country, and the people won't go to work, they won't listen to you, they will no longer do what they're told. You don't have a country anymore. That's total revolution. And they say, there's more of us than there are you. We ain't listening. We're not doing it anymore. We want a new government. At some point, the government falls because it's not a country anymore. It's fallen into anarchy, and they're on the edge of France getting there. And if France gets there, that means that the people can then impose the government that they want, that the people can say, we want snap elections and we want it done the way we want, and they can vote in the people that they want in. At that point, whoever that government is, number one, may likely be somebody different, and it could be somebody that doesn't listen to the EU. Somebody that says, I'm listening to France. Now, all of a sudden, there's huge problems with the EU and the US. What happens when they say, Germany, we want you to screw over your people? Sure. Italy, we want you to screw over your people. No problem. France, we ain't doing it. If one link in the chain goes, guess what? The people in Italy are going to start saying, hey, wait a minute. The French did this. And now they forced leadership. And now those people are listening to us. You know what? That's how you get it done. It only takes one to tip the scale of revolution, and they're on that edge there in France. And if that happens, I think at that point there's going to be big problems in Europe for the ruling elite. They're just totally going to be discredited, and they won't be able to manage the people anymore. It's interesting, isn't it interesting that this is where the French Revolution happened? Zhou Enlai once said when they asked him, what do you think is the outcome of the French? This was like in the 1970s or 80s, and they said, "What do you think about the outcome of the French Revolution?" And he said, "It's too early to tell," which tells you how the Chinese think. But isn't it interesting how when you look at things through a historical context, that as much as the France has gone along with neoliberalism, when it came down to it, the country that had that history of revolution was the one that said, "We will revolt against these people and we'll push back." And as I said, I think Europe also, it's like dry tinder, right? That's what it was here. Dry tinder. It only takes a spark to light the whole forest up. And I think that's what they're on the edge of here.
Yeah, this
beautiful.
is
I'll pass it back to you, Nick. Go ahead.
Beautiful. Yeah, feel free to chime in as well, CJ. This is a great tweet from our friend Zinkis. Make sure you guys check out the show that he was on this past Monday. This is a funny tweet. It said, massive anti-Putin protests in Russia. Russia police goons attacking peaceful protesters with clubs, beating them in the head and the back. The threads are unraveling for the regime. That's what they will tell you on MSNBC. No, that's France. This is France instead.
You know what's great about
always with the great tweets, but Garland, I always thought it was funny because if you saw the narrative that came from liberal journals and the MSNBC, CNN, echo chamber, Putin made a giant miscalculation after invading Ukraine. He isolated himself from the geopolitical community, and now his people are upset and they're going to rise in protest. Meanwhile, you got massive protests in France. You have Emmanuel Macron, who lost his majority before this. You have the UK, who cannot keep a damn prime minister to change their damn life. The United States Congress, who floats around an approval rating around 25%. Joe Biden, historically unpopular. You got European neoliberalism that is crumbling. But they tell us that Russia has crumbled geopolitically. So I want you to speak on this. And I have one last thing we can get you out here soon. Like the overall failed strategy that came from the Biden administration, the West, NATO, the Boris Johnson wing of the UK, that destroyed their standing on the geopolitical world stage. They still believe that they're powerful, even though you got people in France, people in Germany, people in the UK that are starting to protest that had enough of this. So do you want to speak on that? Any other thing you want to add to that?
Yeah, you're on the money with that. And here's why. Because, my dad used to have a saying, children don't listen, they watch and learn, right? And not comparing the rest of the world with children, but here's the bottom line. Tony Blinken is running around saying we've got a rules-based order that we've got to maintain, right? We got to maintain this order, right? And it's rules-based. Well, the truth is people know what it is, right? But it implies order, doesn't it? It implies some level of order. It implies, look, we're going to have a nice order and you should be a part of this so things will be orderly. Well, right now, it looks like a rules-based disorder. Right now, people are looking and they're like, I'm looking at France. That looks like that zombie movie, World War Z. Where's Brad Pitt? Is Brad Pitt running down the street getting chased by zombies? Because that's what it looks like to me. And people are so now, from the perspective of Joe Biden having his democracies versus autocracies summits and all this kind of crap. How do you make the argument to the world with what they're seeing on these videos? This is the order. Don't worry about Russia and China. Last time I saw it, they weren't running through the streets like madmen and zombies in Beijing and Lagos and in Riyadh and on and on. You go around the global South. And the only time you see this is when they're protesting against imperialism. But this is the rules-based order. So the world's looking now at Tony Blinken and Joe Biden and saying, if that's your rules-based order, if that's your democracy versus autocracy, no, thank you. We don't want any of that.